the E3 build was more like Tatsunoko versus Capcom. What's the difference between the build and what can we expect from the next showing?
So the main differences between the E3 and Comic-Con builds were, as you say, the Tatsunoko style and Marvel vs. Capcom 2 style. Now, Tatsunoko was a game that was quite heavily normalized, so you may pick several different characters, but they all tended to be able to do similar things, whereas Marvel vs. 3 characters are all individually differentiated. So by picking a certain combination, you might not be able to do a certain things that an average character could do. And this is the direction we are going towards, so the next build will perhaps have even more stronger flavour of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but additionally with that differentiation of the characters.
You said you were going to experiment with the next kind of thing, the new characters. I think you mentioned like a flying system for one character. What other sort of things are you going to experiment with in the coming months?
Perhaps a character from a certain franchise or a certain series will be able to do some special moves that was only possible in that game or series, comics, whatever. But obviously, bringing something like that would be quite disadvantageous to other characters, so it's really all about the balance.
You said that you mentioned a bit too much on the live stream and your production managers weren't very happy. But you said you wanted to get closer to the fans and the whole development cycle. I mean, do you think that's the way forward from here on out, where more and more getting the fans involved with how the games are made and kind of get them involved in that process? Do you think that's the future?
So yes, I got told off, but I've been spilling the beans later to other people, and I got told off again for that. But I think this is actually quite important because there's not been many opportunities for fans to get in touch with producers and directors directly. So I don't think this is something we should control, but moderately encourage it, but with moderation. So I mean, it seems to be the focus of the community and the fan gamers that for Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is the roster. They really want to know what characters in the game. And if somebody asks me what characters are going to be in the game, then I won't say anything. But if perhaps one character managed to work something out and just asked, is this so-and-so in the game, then it's quite natural that Niitsuma-san can't lie, so he'll just say, oh, that's a very good question. And then the rest of the community just followed and started asking similar questions. So that I was told off for. But again, this is something we can't really stop doing, because then fans and communities will cease to talk to us.
Obviously it's going to be a massive roster. I mean, where exactly do you start in the design process and where do you go from there to kind of build up the roster?
So we first put together a candidate list, and then we would go on to the next step of making the rough sketches or rough models. And then if at that point the character didn't work, then we'll bin that character. So I suppose we would consider all characters until that point, and then we just stop taking them any further if we don't think they fit the game.
Was there any point where Marvel or Capcom came in and said, we want this character in the game, or tried to give you guidance maybe on characters that they want in the limelight for other franchises kind of thing?
Both Marvel and Capcom both produced a wish list of characters that we wanted in-game. We then matched them up, and then for those characters that we both wanted, just went into the game straight away. And those characters that only one party wanted, we would then negotiate to whether that should be in there or not, and the rest is just all discussion.
Was there ever a situation where one party wanted them in and you just couldn't fit them into the game? Say, if they didn't work, that you couldn't fit them into special moves and stuff like that?
I mean, that's true for both brands, Capcom and Marvel. No matter how popular they are, some of these characters don't have suitable moves or actions for fighting game. So unfortunately for those characters, we had to pass.
If there's one certain character that the public really want and they're not in the game, is there kind of that room for movement to get them in the game, or does it depend on the characters?
I mean, at this stage of development, everything's pretty much locked down. So adding a new character would mean starting the model completely from scratch. So in terms of timeline, it's probably quite a difficult thing to do now.
Maybe would it factor into kind of DLC and stuff like that?
Yeah, in terms of schedule, if we've got more room in production team for them to work on, and if it doesn't have to be alongside the launch, then it is a possibility that it could be in DLC.
I know we can't talk about specific characters outside the ones you've already announced. I mean, what sort of roster size can we expect? Can we expect bigger than Marvel vs. Capcom 2?
I mean, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 only had that many characters because there were evidently many cloned characters within the roster. And considering the quality that we have to build up these 3D models and balancing in this HD console game, it's a bit difficult to do more or equal to Marvel vs. Capcom 2 characters.
Yeah, the tag team system inherently makes it more difficult for players to get their head around and to make it's more of a steeper learning curve. How do you make that more accessible for maybe non-fighting fans who you want to entice into the fighting genre with Marvel vs. Capcom 3?
It should be up to the players whether to pursue a quick casual gameplay or the absolute stoicism in mind reading game. So this time he has implemented a simple mode as well as standard mode. So in simple mode you may only use the stick, and perhaps you could just use a button or two to pull off most of the moves that standard mode can play. So by doing so, you'd get the feel of the tempo of the game, how game should run. And once they get used to the simple mode and they get, they're no longer scared of adding a few more buttons in their play, then they could move on to play standard mode. So we hope this would kind of cater for any level of players.
You're such a big cast of characters. How hard is it to get the balance right, especially with the tag team mode kind of like intertwined?
There's basically no ways of cutting corners for this type of thing, so it's pretty much all down to QA. They will have to play it again and again and again to review the game and the balancing, to make sure there's no invincible combination or the weakest combination. So yeah, they're working very hard to make sure that it's not flatting and it's not completely normalized, but then there would be no unfair situations.
Aratsu was an interesting choice that came from left field. What's the choice for including her? And she seemed a little bit overpowered to me from the gameplay trailers that came out around Comic-Con, I think.
I mean, she may appear really strong in that video, but that video is the purpose of that video is to introduce Amaterasu, so it only shows her good bits. We'll be doing that for every other character that we'll be announcing, so you might think the same for the next time we announce these characters. You'd think that character's too good, but it's all theatrics.
It's the size for me, obviously, because they're like maybe a quarter of the size of the Hulk. I mean, does that play into the whole balancing thing, or does that make it harder?
Obviously the team will be taking that into consideration, and they may perhaps reduce her health, or her individual attacks are weak compared to the number of combos she may do. So there are ways of balancing things out like that.
Fighting games are usually obviously very multiplayer centric. How do you intend to kind of reach the single players here? Are you planning a really powerful story with all the characters and the cast? I mean, is that playing with things, or is it your main focus just on the multiplayer and kind of just getting together and facing off against one another?
So primarily, as you say, it is a fighting game and you play with other people, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be fun on your own. So we will be implementing several modes that will perhaps fill the time when you're not playing with other people, that is up to satisfactory level.
The Japanese gaming industry as a whole it's come under a bit of fire recently, mainly from Japanese developers. I mean, what's Niitsuma's stance on the gaming industry as a whole and how they're developing while the West seem to be excelling at a kind of exponential pace?
He personally doesn't despair entirely, and he believes there are several genres that Japanese developers excel in, including fighting games. He doesn't think any other fighting games have the intricate balancing and tuning like the Japanese developers do. However, how the Japanese developers take advantage of their advantage is a different question. So it really depends on how fast they realise and how they're going to utilise what they have. Otherwise, you are right. They will be left out one day.
You just mentioned the fighting genre specifically. Obviously, Japan is miles ahead of the kind of the Western civilization on that front. Why do you think that is, and why is it that we haven't really seen any good fighting franchise come out of any other country really, apart from Japan?
Because Niitsuma-san thinks fighting games require quite a stern craftsmanship type of work, there's no way out. It's irrelevant to efficiency. It's irrelevant to logicalization. It's just sitting there working on it, or bringing people who are skilled, get them to sit down and just work on it. It requires that sort of patience, and he does think that's one thing the Japanese developers are excelled in. So maybe for the moment, and at least in the near future, that would probably still be kept as a Japanese speciality.
Microsoft have been keen to push the Xbox 360 in Japan, but it hasn't really taken on the same as the PlayStation. But I was just wondering what Niitsuma's thoughts were on the whole of why hasn't Microsoft been able to crack Japan? What are they kind of doing wrong?
Yes, I mean, it might be a cultural thing because after all, when a typical Japanese person hears about Sony and Microsoft as two different brands, they tend to be able to relate to Sony a lot more than Microsoft, and Microsoft is something that is just quite alien in a way. And I think so far, when Microsoft brings something good, they tend not to really explain it. They just say, this is amazing, this is awesome, what do you think? But I think Japanese consumers usually require a bit more guidance, so they tend to be in need of further explanations. So you have to say, this is big and awesome, and this part is made of this, and that's why it's good, and this can do this much thing, so that's why it's good. And I think Sony's probably so far better in explaining things to the Japanese market. Obviously, that's not going to explain everything, but there must be this Japanese thing, an American thing. I mean, obviously Niitsuma-san is a hardcore gamer. He has both consoles, PS3 and Xbox 360. But perhaps what Microsoft hasn't quite done yet is to pay attention to maybe perhaps smaller parts, so relationship with retail or local events. So Sony tends to do everything at the same time, whereas Microsoft may do big things but in fewer fields. So again, it's sort of Niitsuma-san's gut feelings, but that's what he thinks.
Get there! Get out! Anime power action! It's Player one win! Hey! Yeah, you! I'm down here busting my ass while you sit on yours.